what was being demonstrated by Lady Hussey was a racial microaggression. She believed that Ngozi was out of place, that she didn't belong, and therefore we had the interrogation. And
let's go to our top story then. Prince William has said that racism has no place in our society after his godmother resigned as a palace aide for questioning a black domestic abuse campaigner about where she really came from. The campaigner was British. Ngozi Fulani, who's 61, was attending a reception hosted by the Queen yesterday at the palace to mark the UN's 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. The aide, Lady Susan Hussey, who's 83, had been lady-in-waiting to Queen Elizabeth II and was made Lady of the Household by King Charles. Nova Reid, leader of the British Women's Equality Party, also attended the event at Buckingham Palace and described what happened.
Very quickly, she zoomed in on Ngozi and asked her where she was from. Ngozi said she was from Sister Space, which is the organisation she leads. What followed was almost an interrogation. There was question after question about where she was really from, where her people came from, what her nationality was.
Well, let's now seek the opinion of Nova Reid, a writer, broadcaster and activist. Welcome to the show, Nova.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
Tell me what you make of this story, Nova, the incident, and how the stories continued to escalate during the day. I'm really interested to get your perspective on it.
Well, I think, it's the interrogation around where Ngozi was from when she had already given an answer, several answers, and declared multiple times that she was British, is something that a lot of us who are black experience on a daily basis, where there is this obsession with tracing one's ancestry rather than accepting the words that are coming out of your mouth as fact and believing them. And I talk about this in my book, The Good Ally, and also in a TED Talk. What was being demonstrated by Lady Hussey was a racial microaggression. She believed that Ngozi was out of place, that she didn't belong, and therefore we had the interrogation. And for me, I've been to events at the palace. There is a lot of security that you have to get through before you're even through the door, and that includes showing your passport. So the fact that somebody who is a senior royal felt it was appropriate to continue that line of inquiry when that wasn't her role, and then have the audacity to put her hands on another person's body and touch hair, that is diabolical behaviour.
Yeah, look, the campaigner, Ngozi Fulani, who I've spoken to on Times Radio, actually, and she's brilliant, and Sister Space, rightly should be getting some airspace as well. It's a domestic abuse charity for black women. She said, look, what's the lesson here? When I drove into the palace, as you said, the car was searched and we were searched as you would expect because they have to protect the royal household. But what protects us, black people, from that treatment? The incident is unfortunate and shows that nothing has changed. She was sort of quick to point out that she doesn't want to vilify Lady Hussey. But from your comments there, a lot of this is, it is a universal thing. And you call it a microaggression. I would probably say it starts as a microaggression, something typical. But it actually then starts to get pretty intrusive and condescending.
It is.
Perhaps you could forgive the first question, could you? But not the kind of follow-up questions, because Lady Hussey keeps pursuing the line of inquiry.
Yes, and I think that's the element. Be curious about where somebody is from, and the answer that Ngozi gave was, well, Sister Space is the name of the charity. No. Where are you really from? Where are your people from? And then it comes about tracing ancestry. Then it comes about not believing that you belong here, even though not just anybody is invited into the palace. I think that also needs to be highlighted as well. This is somebody who is the CEO of an organisation who's doing powerful work to highlight the disproportionate outcomes for black women who are survivors of domestic abuse and sexual abuse. They are supposed to be there, and so it is incredibly disrespectful and humiliating when you have to answer this line of inquiry. And I think that's the issue. It's the disrespect, it's the lack of belief in the first answer, and also it's not your business.
Yeah, she Fulani said that she was shocked by it, and the rest of the evening passed in a blur because she just didn't quite know what to make of it. And she also pointed out that she didn't feel she had anyone to complain to, and so she turned to Twitter. I saw her comment first thing today, and I've been interested to see how the story's escalated during the day to the point that Lady Susan Hussey has had to resign, and it's been met with condemnation by a spokesperson for Prince William. How much of the story, Nova, and clearly Lady Hussey was completely wrong to pursue with her line of questioning, but how much of the story is about a generational divide?
And this is interesting because I have somebody who has completed my anti-racism course and has, followed my work and engaged with my book, The Good Ally. And she's in her 70s, and I met her last month for the first time at a book signing. And she said, "You know what, Nova, don't let anybody tell you that you're too old to unlearn this stuff. This has transformed my life and the life of the people I care about, and I will continue to do this until the day I die. It is entirely possible to unlearn things that you've learned about groups of people that are harmful, that once weren't." And one thing I want to highlight, we're obviously talking about this line of questioning of where Ngozi was from and not believing that she was a British citizen. These are racial microaggressions, and what I talk about, it's not these things in isolation. It's that many of us experience this on a regular basis, on a daily basis, when you're doing your work, when you're going food shopping, when you're chatting to a neighbour. And there is so much research that shows regular exposure to this kind of racial stress can show up in Black bodies as trauma. So this isn't just about a few words. It's about how we are being socialised and how we are being disrespected and how we are constantly treated like we don't belong. So it's not about, it can't just be about condemnation and the palace distancing themselves from Lord Hussey, Lady Hussey. She's been in that family and in that institution for quite some time. I'm sure this behaviour, I'm going to assume that this behaviour isn't the first time that it's come out, but it's the first time that it's been highlighted in public. You've got to take responsibility. Okay, yes, you can condemn it, but what are you going to do about it? We've heard multiple accounts. Harry and Meghan spoke publicly about the racism they experienced in the monarchy, so much so that they emancipated themselves from the monarchy and Britain. Like, that is extreme. So that means there's something going on in the fabric of the institution, and we've got a history that will give us some snippets into where that culture has come from and has been embedded. But you can't just condemn racism. You have to actively
you have to make a change, don't you?
And address
it.
Absolutely.
Look, one thing, speaking not as a Black person myself, I have to say one thing that the story does is it does give people examples of what microaggressions, micro or not, it gives people examples, and it does educate people along the way. It shouldn't have to be this way, but by giving examples and by calling it out, as Fulani's done, it does in its own way, and I'm not saying that this is a brilliant thing at all. It's just one of those things. It does educate people, doesn't it, Nova? It does make people think, my goodness me, actually, that is wrong. And here's a clear example. And now it's being explained to me. It makes sense.
It does, but I wish it didn't have to come to this extreme, because there's been so many learning opportunities. We had a huge one in summer 2020 with the murder of George Floyd. So much resources were out there. So many books have been published on this subject. I've got a TED Talk. Other people have spoken about it. It's not new information. So we've got to start asking the question, the information is out there. Why are we not engaging, and why are we not changing? Because all that it takes is to believe Black people when they say they're experiencing racism, or if somebody's curious enough to ask them where they're from, then believe us on our first answer. Don't interrogate our ancestry.
Yeah. Listen, thank you so much for so eloquently putting that across to us. Nova Reid, who is a writer, a broadcaster and activist. She's an anti-racism educator, and her book is called The Good Ally as well. And it's been really good to speak to you, Nova. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.